All right, so today we're going to be assembling the TARDIS kit. I have taken my kit and organized it into the various different components. When you get yours, you'll get it in this bag. Inside the bag, you will also have a smaller bag that has the stickers. We're going to set that to the side for now, and I'll show you how I've kind of separated everything apart. This is your base piece. With the base piece, we are going to build from that, but initially we need to do some other pre-work first. First, you'll notice that I've separated the stuff into these different piles. You have the various doors here. You will notice that a lot of these pieces have two different sized pieces. The first are the frames. There are two different sizes for the frames. And for the internal paneling that's going to hide the interior, there are two different sizes. That is important because if you don't use the right size, you're going to get to a point in the build where suddenly things won't fit. And with the style of adhesive we're using, it's pretty much impossible to go back from that point. So I have the top over here. This piece goes with the top. I have the panels for the doors, the frames for the doors, the base piece, and then these we're going to use for the stickers. And these components over here are optional components if you wanted to incorporate lighting into your design. In this tutorial, we will not go over the lighting setup, but you will find at the end of the tutorial a link to purchase the equipment you will need if you want to do it yourself. So to begin, let's get the doors prepped. You'll notice that the doors, which slide into these grooves here at the base, there is a little 1/8 inch overlap between where they line up, and that overlap is at this junction point here. So because of that, we need to be careful about how we place these interior panels. So these interior panels are meant to mask the door so that when it's assembled, it looks like that, and it looks like it's actually intended to be filled in. But we need to do it in such a way so that we don't block off that 1/8 inch gap in order to allow them to then sit properly inside of the base piece. So what I'm going to use is this thicker super glue adhesive, and I'm also going to use this pen kit accelerant to allow me to not have to sit here and hold stuff together. If you do not have these in your spaces or your studios, you can always come into the lab and use the equipment here, and we'll be able to assist you then with the assembly. But let's start by getting the doors prepped. Now do bear in mind that whatever is facing the front will be a part of the final design. So if one side is marred or if you don't like how one side looks, then you definitely want to make sure that you don't use that side for the front. Now, if you're going to do like we did with our example TARDIS, you're going to end up painting it, so none of this really matters. But it is important to kind of think through depending on what your intentions are for the kit. It's also important that you want to make sure that it doesn't move too far down so that we still have room to slide this into the frame. And also, you don't want it to slide too far up and cover the windows. In this design, we're going to attach the vellum for the windows, which is right over here. We're going to attach these as I make the doors. Now, it's important with the vellum that you don't use the accelerant or it's going to mar the vellum. It's also important to note that if you do intend to paint this, I would suggest you add the vellum after painting. That way you don't have to worry about potentially getting paint on the vellum and then having to cut it out of your design before then replacing it afterwards. If you do mess up your vellum and you don't have anything to replace it, it's good to note that you can use really any sort of paper. The nice thing about the vellum is that it's just transparent enough that when I do use the lighting setup, it creates great dispersion of the light. So that's something to keep in mind if you were to decide to use an alternative material, or if you accidentally messed up your vellum sheets and you needed to use something else. So you can see here is one completed Here is one completed panel. So we're going to do this now with the additional 4. Now, you may have also noticed I did not use the accelerant on this. The reason why is because these sit long enough while I build the others that it's not really necessary. When I start to place everything into the base piece, I will start to use that to help kind of accelerate the process. But for now, it's kind of unnecessary. Another thing to keep in mind too with this, as you go to build these, is you want to make sure that you have your doors all facing the same direction. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a position in which you'll have doors that no longer fit because they are both facing the same direction. So they may look like they can be mirrored, but bear in mind that that is not the case. See, like with this one right here, if I were to build this door as is, I wouldn't be able to then put the panels in correctly because it is facing the wrong direction. So if I flip it around, you'll see that creates a nice edge gap with the other door. So I know that the back piece of this is where I want to build my next section. So we'll set my panel over there. We'll grab this one. We'll grab one of each of the back panels, and we will glue again. Now, you don't need a lot, so keep that in mind. This is pretty powerful adhesive. It's not Elmer's glue where you got to just, submerge the entire piece in glue seemingly to get it to properly stick. And because a lot of this gets masked, I honestly like to place the top of the panel kind of right below the window point. That way it gives you a little bit more flexibility in your base, give you a little bit more wiggle room in getting it to sit properly into the actual base piece itself. All right, do another vellum. And there we have panel number 2. So now we can actually start to put this together. You'll see panel 1, and there's my second panel. I now have this corner joint. Let's grab the next piece and see how this is going to fit. So, same thing. I want to make sure that you're building it in such a way that the panels are not in the way. Cool. One of each panel. And as you may notice, I'm just kind of hitting the cross beams where it will sit. Now, this isn't necessarily obvious by what I have been doing. So you may be asking, which panel do you put in first, the thicker one or the thinner one? The answer is it doesn't really matter. The nice thing is that the seam created by the two is hidden from that support that's going down the center of the door itself. So you don't have to worry about lining things up or hiding things. You can just do it either way. So long as you ensure that you do get different sized ones, and then you don't have to worry about running into issues of them being too wide and not properly fitting into the base. All right. Vellum attachment number 3. All right, now we're getting there. This is definitely the most complex part of the build. So it's easy to just look at this part and say, what did I get myself into? But do not worry. That is what I am here for. Sweet. All right, take our last 2 panels. We're going to place our glue down. Place the first panel. Make sure that one's lined up. Place the second panel. Interesting. See. Now, if you just do what I just did, you will notice that if your panels are not being covered by the design, you're putting your panels in the wrong location. What I just noticed is that I almost just tried to attach my panel into the wrong location. So that is a nice part about the design that will kind of help stop you from making mistakes. That would have been very bad if I didn't notice that before assembly. As you might have just noticed, what I was trying to do is I was trying to put these panels based off that edge. And were I to do that, what would have happened is when I went to place it in, it would not have fit up against this other piece. All right. Final piece of vellum. And now we can take and actually put all of these pieces together. So what you want to do is you want to ensure that you get them to line up in this little kind of T pose, or I guess more of like an edge pose here. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue this seam against this edge here. So you'll want to lay glue onto this edge and then place these two together and then place them into the base piece. So what we'll do is I'll set this door down, I'll get my glue, I'll run just a little bit of glue. Again, remember with this stuff, with this stuff, less is more. So we'll run that through. I will attach it. and then place it into the frame. And this is going to be what we build from for the rest of the design. Now for this one, I am going to take some of my accelerant. I am going to run just a little bit. The nice thing is that much of this design from here on out is going to be held together by itself, but some of this early stuff we're going to help kind of encourage along the way. With the glue, less is more. I cannot stress how much that is true of the accelerant as well. We're talking about single drops will be a sufficient quantity. And if you are using the accelerant and you're not familiar with it, make sure you're in a situation in which you have ventilation. If you ever start to feel lightheaded, take a break, open up a window, come back to it later. This stuff is in essence just diesel fuel. Okay. So, looking at the rest of the design here. So this piece is next. Slide the final door into place. Okay, looks to make sure it fits, and it does. Run a seam of glue, a couple drops off that final panel, and then place it back into position. And now we have the base of the design. So let's run a little bit of the accelerant onto this new seams that onto the two new seams that we just created. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take it, flip it over, and now we need to glue everything to the base. Now, you're going to notice that everything doesn't quite fit perfectly into the base. That's okay. What we really just need is for everything to be level so that it fits at the top. So what I like to do is take this, set it upside down like that, take your glue, and just put a little bit of glue into each one of these spots. Then what we're going to do is we're going to follow up with a little bit of accelerant to lock that into place. All right. And remember with this, one drop on each is about enough. All right. And now you can see that I can pick it up by that base piece. And if we flip it over, there is our TARDIS so far. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add these front panels. Now the front panels go opposite each other by size. So like this and like this. So go ahead and place your first one in. It really doesn't matter where the first one goes. Everything is going to build from that one. It also doesn't matter which size you choose for the first one, because again, everything's going to build from that point out. Now, if your base is floating a little bit, as ours is in this situation, you want to have your top piece line up with the top edge, like that is right there. So you want to have this line up correctly, because once we go to put the top on, that's going to line up based on those pieces. So with that in mind, we can take this piece and attach some glue to the back side of it. All right, once it's in position, you can use your accelerant again. Just be careful not to drop accelerant where the vellum is. And truth be told with this, you don't necessarily need to get accelerant onto every piece. Just get enough that it kind of anchors the piece down, and then let the glue dry for the rest of it. All right, for the next side, since I started on a small piece, I'm going to use one of the thicker pieces for the next side. Remember, it's important to alternate those pieces. Okay, that looks pretty good, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. I'm going to apply the glue. All right, now at this point in the process, it's vital that you glue yourself to the design. Don't forget to do that part. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm good, I'm free. As you will notice though, when you move to the second piece, they don't quite line up. And that's because when you go to this other side, this piece, the other thin one, is meant to line up with the big one again. So don't lose any sleep if you notice that they are not perfectly lining up. Cool. All right, so back side, another thin one. Just make sure it lines up correctly first. pretty good on this side. Now, as you get through more of this design, you're going to start to notice that stuff is going to start to want to fit into place, and you're going to start to have less and less resistance to, or less and less tendency to fall out of place. But once again, we're going to glue our piece down. This one ended up being a little squirrely, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it in its position. And then glue it down. And yeah, instead of using the accelerant on this one, I'm going to just hold it in place to make sure that it all lines up correctly. Alrighty, and one more piece. You need to take our last big piece and attach it. Let's make sure it's going to fit into place. And you'll notice with these pieces, because these pieces are so much longer than they are thick, there's not much really reinforcing them. So they tend to kind of move around a lot, which is good because it allows you to kind of position it the way you want it to. But go ahead and add glue to this piece. I'm being a little bit more generous on this than I need to, just because I'm getting close to the finish line and I'm trying to overcompensate on my gluing. Sweet. I'll give that a gentle press into place. All right. And there is our TARDIS so far. So we have our four corners. You'll notice that inside there's a bit of a lip. If you want to mount a light into the interior, what I would suggest you do Okay. If you wanted to include a light, you see that there's a little bit of a lip there. What I would suggest is that you take one of these little thin pieces that came with your design and cut it down to fit into that interior. So I did that with this one. I just kind of broke off the piece. I'm going to attach it, put a little bit of glue on each end. and then attach it inside. And I'm going to be very careful with my accelerant, but I'm going to try to use my accelerant to kind of help this stay in place so you can see. But then you end up with a little cross brace like that. And that is what you'll end up gluing the LED to so that it sits inside of the base. Same thing as with the bottom. What we're going to do now is we're going to attach glue to each of the top points. And then we're going to go through and drop some accelerant to help expedite the process. All right, and there is our top and sides all assembled. Next we're going to do is we're going to set that to the side and we're going to build the top piece that sits. So depending on your version, you're going to have 2 or 3 attachment pieces. The 2 base pieces here, and then these pieces as well. So what you'll do is you'll just start to glue each of those together. So first, we're going to glue these 2 base pieces. Like that. And now you're going to build this kind of like a ziggurat. So we're going to take this next piece, we're going to attach the glue to it. And you're going to place it so that you try to line up the openings. 1, so that it retains the same style of design, and 2, so that you don't impede the light once you set that up, if you elect to go around using a light. So now we'll attach this next piece. Same way we did before, trying to keep the opening as centered as possible. And then the final piece is just a simple block of wood with an opening cut into it to allow light out. So we'll do the same thing. Unlike the rest of the design, I suggest you add the glue to this piece itself, as it's a little bit hard to get it onto the edges of the other piece. So add, 4 or 5 little beads right along the edge, and then place the piece down to fit. And you end up with the little ziggurat looking top. Now, you may think that the next step is to glue the top of this to the top of the TARDIS. You can do that if you don't want to deal with any electronics or lighting interior. If you do, I would suggest you leave these sections open And what we'll do is we're going to attach these little sections of wood here that you're going to use for stickers, but that we can also use to kind of act as a lip to grab onto the top itself. Now the way these are going to work is you'll glue them so that they're flush with the two base pieces that are the same size. And if you do it that way, you'll see that there's going to be a little bit of a lip created because of that. And it's going to be that lip that is going to allow us to latch this top section onto the bottom section. So now you see there's the first one, and we'll proceed with the other four. Now, the fun thing about this project again is there's so much customization that can go into it. Like I said, you can include a lighting setup, which we will include the link to how to purchase that. You can paint it, if you will see the one that we have in the lab, which I will include a picture of at the end. So it's a fun little project. And if you want to do none of those things, you can always just finish gluing it all together and go on your merry way. Now, I'm going to use accelerant on this one so that we can move on to the final piece. And we'll go ahead and use accelerant on this one too, so I can move on to the stickers. So now, here is our altered top. And as you see, if I attach it, it creates a decent amount of friction in and of itself. But, so here is our finished TARDIS. Also TARDIS. What I'm going to do now as a final step for this video is I'm going to show you the stickers that came with your kit as well. Also a good point to note as I pull these out, if you mess up any part of your kit, you are always welcome to stop back at the Creative Production Lab and we will cut out a new piece for you. You will have to pay for new pieces cut out, but everything is pretty cheap. So don't lose too much sleep over it. especially on a build like this that's a little bit more complex. You might end up messing up some parts, accidentally gluing stuff together that wasn't meant to. So feel free to stop by and we'll help you out.